Measuring learning impact, an AFT insight. One question that most L&D practitioners ask our consultants is how they can justify their learning budgets. Interestingly, when the pandemic initially broke out, many of our scheduled trainings had to fall off because our clients' training budgets had been slashed in order to make way for the crisis relief plans. Usually, the training budget gets cut first whenever an organization is undergoing budget cuts. This is an unfortunate practice in many organizations. One question that comes to mind is the training function not critical enough to survive the chopping board? Well, the good news is that the learning function is in actual fact critical. But why do many executives then start with cutting employee capacity building interventions whenever they decide to cut budgets? The following are 3 common reasons why this happens. Number 1, failure to align training interventions to business objectives. Number 2, not communicating the value of the training interventions, which in many cases is the result of number 3, lack of data that proves the value of the learning function. Now, let us look at the first reason, failure to align training interventions to business objectives. One of the reasons that make the L&D function to be deemed less critical is the failure of those responsible for this function to align training interventions to business objectives. If you do not design your training plans with the end in mind, you'll find it hard to align with the ultimate business objectives. Training is not about events or ticking the box. You have to know what problems your trainings are solving. When you talk of effective trainings, you talk of result-oriented trainings, and such trainings are aligned to your goals, strategy, and vision. The second reason, failure to communicate the value of the training interventions. If you have ever wondered why your L&D budgets get cut first, or why it is difficult to get sufficient budget allocation, then another challenge you might be struggling with is your failure to communicate the value of the learning function. Many L&D practitioners don't realize that they are salespersons. The success of your learning function lies in your ability to sell your training to different stakeholders, and you can only get their buy-in when people see the value of what you are offering. Now, value means different things to different people. For instance, the line manager wants to understand how the training will improve the employees' capabilities in their departments. The finance manager, on the other hand, wants to understand the return of investment on that training. The employee who will be undergoing training also wants to understand how participating in that training will contribute to their career progression and professional development. Overall, the organization wants to understand how the training ultimately improves business performance. For instance, after the training, will there be an increase in customer satisfaction or a rise in sales? Unless you communicate the value of your training, it will be difficult to get buy-in from any of your stakeholders. Lastly, let us look at the third and final reason, lack of data that proves the value of the learning function. Communicating the value of your training interventions requires data. When you intentionally measure the impact of your trainings, you can factually prove how relevant, strategic, and valuable the learning function is within the organization. Data-driven learning analytics and reporting helps you, the learning and development practitioner, link training performance to essential business results, and this is the quality of information that is needed for your L&D unit to be considered a critical strategic partner to all business units. There are many learning metrics that can be used to measure learner experience or learner engagement. However, the most crucial metrics to prove your strategic value are those that determine the business impact. For example, job impact, time to job impact, and business performance. More than ever, now is the time to prove the criticalness of the L&D function. We are at a time where almost all things have become new, and thus the learning function is expected to drive the necessary change within the organization. At such a time as this, the L&D function cannot afford to have an inadequate budget. So, prioritize these 3 things. Number 1, know your organizational vision and objectives and align your training interventions to those business objectives. Number 2, make sure you measure your training impact and collect as much data as you can from other business units and functions that are impacted by the employees you have trained. Number 3, communicate the value of your training interventions to all stakeholders.